This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Christopher Mitchell, 212th Trooper, Silas 1610, and Papa Podo. Meanwhile, Bulkhead and Elita tear their way through the city streets, with the former in his vehicle mode, while the latter rides atop him as a spider. As for Prowl, he has been tasked with leading the Dinobots across the elevated highway, since while their presence may cause some disruption to commuters, a straight line will be much easier for the big brutes to navigate. Not to mention with how cumbersome they are, they'd probably just wind up causing more destruction and property damage if they had to traverse Detroit's urban center. This does unfortunately mean that Elita and Bulk will have to hold off Lugnut and Blitzwing on their own until reinforcements can arrive. Though as they learn when they arrive at Sumdeck Tower, they have far more to deal with than just a pair of wayward Decepticons. By now, all four villains have assembled, with the two flyers joining their master in the air, while Sentinel stands in the wreckage of Isaac's lab, smirking proudly, as now that Megatron is back, they will have no trouble crushing Optimus and his band of rejects, before claiming the Allspark and using it to conquer Cybertron with him at the Decepticon ruler's right hand. However, it seems this will be even easier than he had anticipated. As spying Elita and the big green mudflap pulling up outside the tower, he calls out to his leader, offering to scrap them as a welcome back gift, to which Megatron tells him to do as he pleases, since while he is eager to crush the Autobots beneath his servos for the indignity they forced on him for the past 50 stellar cycles, it doesn't matter which of them he destroys personally and which are terminated by a subordinate, as they are all beneath his notice as individuals. Taking this as a chance to show off in front of the Warlord, Sentinel leaps down into the street, while from the lab, Sari yells for her friends to be careful, with this giving them some small relief to see the human girl and her father have not been killed, something they had been dreading would happen once the utility to Megatron dried up. But now is not the time to celebrate, as the pair must focus on holding Sentinel at bay long enough to rescue Sari and Professor Sumdeck, though what they are meant to do with them after that is a mystery, since fleeing is no longer an option, not with Megatron active again. If only Optimus was here, since he'd know what to do. But he's not, and unless Ratchet can work a miracle, he might never be coming back, so it's up to Elita to figure out a plan and make it work, for the sake of her team, their human friends, and the city they have adopted as their home. However, right now she's out of time to sit and think, as the moment he's back on his feet, Sentinel goes in the attack, specifically targeting Elita, since in his eyes everything wrong with his life tracks directly back to her. Due to not wanting to touch her, the former Autobot makes use of his lance, thrusting it out and attempting to impale her on the tip. Fortunately, due to having seen this coming, Elita is able to leap out of the way of the initial attack and transform back into bot mode, as she smirks this is hardly the way to greet an old friend. From the disgusted scowl that twists his face to the idea that a techno-organic freak would dare speak to him directly, Sentinel obviously isn't in the mood to trade barbs. A shame, since that would have allowed her to buy some time. No matter, since knowing her former comrade, she has another way to stall him, and so begins spitting globs of web at him. As she'd anticipated, this antipathy for everything organic sees the green and purple bot recoil and do everything he can to dodge the webs, or else block them with his shield when this proves impossible. This does at least halt his advances, as he cannot get closer without running the risk of being splattered by the excretion, though Elita knows this is at most a stopgap measure, as sooner or later Megatron or one of his flunkies will get tired of this farce and step in to help, since they don't share Sentinel's phobia. Thankfully, he is not the only one with allies, as at that moment Prowl and the Dinobots arrive, and seeing Sentinel trying to hurt Spider Lady, Grimlock wastes no time barreling into the truck bot and pinning him down. Smiling fondly at the bruiser, Elita calls him a good boy, before instructing him to keep Sentinel contained, and looking to the others, she tells Snarl and Swoop to focus on Lugnut, since hopefully his limited processor will struggle to handle two opponents at once, while she and Bulkhead will tackle Blitzwing, freeing Prowl up to employ his famed stealth and rescue the humans. Understanding their orders, the Autobots and Dinobots split into their teams, with Swoop flying up and tackling Lugnut to the ground, while Elita employs an equally tried and true method to get her target on an even footing, by insulting him, with this forcing the triple changer into his rage form, who predictably descends so he can inflict some up-close and personal pain on the Autobots. Unfortunately, this does mean dealing with his flames, which Optimus had hypothesized would be hazardous to Elita's techno-organic body, though that is what Bulk is here for, as when Blitzwing turns into a tank and attempts to scorch her, the Green Goliath leaps in and pushes his teammate to safety, even if this does mean taking a burn on his own arm. Refusing to waste her friend's help, Elita then uses this opportunity to shoot some webs onto the ground that quickly gum up the Decepticon's treads, temporarily paralyzing him, and allowing Bulk to launch his wrecking ball into Blitzwing's face as he begins transforming back into bot mode. Meanwhile, over with the Dinobots, it seems Lugnut has finally met his match, as manifesting his club, Snarl has taken to walloping the one-eyed brute around the head and stomach, while Swoop has continued harassing him from above. Due to Blitzwing and Sentinel being on the ground, Lugnut is unable to deal with this problem with his poke as he would like, forcing him to find a more creative solution, something he is not very good at. As a result, it seems the Autobots might actually have a chance at claiming victory here thanks to clever strategy. That is until Megatron enters the fight. Having grown tired of his minions' incompetence against such a small force of pathetic Autobots, the Decepticon leader descends, with his first order of business being to draw one of his swords and use the momentum of his fall to vertically bisect Snarl, ending him immediately. However, this is not all he means to do, as raising his fusion cannon, he fires it at Bulkhead, with the blast striking him directly in the chest and sending him crashing through several buildings before coming to a stop a block away, with it only being by the grace of the Allspark itself that he is still online. Next on Megatron's hit list is none other than Grimlock, though unlike his other targets, the Dinobot leader is coming to him, as having spotted the new biggest threat on the battlefield, Grimlock's one-track processor had forgotten all about his orders and spurred him on to charge Megatron down in T-Rex mode. Unfortunately, such simplistic tactics will not work against a veteran of the Great War, with Megatron simply sidestepping the charge and drawing his second blade to slice Grimlock across the back. Letting out a roar of pain, the big brute then transforms back into bot mode and summons his own burning blade, which he attempts to swing at the Warlord, though this is equally unsuccessful, with it only taking a single slash from one of his larger foe's swords to sunder the Dinobot's weapon, while the other is driven pommel first into Grimlock's processor, knocking him out cold and ending their brief duel. Having decimated half of the Autobot and Dinobot forces in under a cycle, Megatron sardonically states that he trusts his Decepticons can handle the rest of these fools. As for him, he is going to claim the Allspark at long last, with him then transforming into his helicopter configuration and rising back into the air. Knowing that she cannot afford to let him take possession of the ancient relic, Elita desperately fires a thick web tether onto his tail and digs her heels into the pavement, while yelling for Swoop and Prowl as the only ones left to do whatever they must to prevent Megatron from leaving the city, since if he gets away, everyone on Earth and Cybertron is doomed. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Prowl deposits the Sumdax on the street and begins throwing his shurikens up at Megatron's rotor blades, while Swoop in turn attempts to scratch the Warlord's windshield, having assumed this is his face. However, even with all three heroes putting everything they have into keeping him at bay, it is clear the Decepticon leader is only moments away from escaping and laying his servos in the Allspark, and with it, ultimate power. Seeing this, Elita makes a grim decision, and one she hoped she would never have to, as she begins channeling her cyber venom and preparing what should be a lethal dose, even for a foe as large and powerful as Megatron. Ever since gaining this organic ability, she had resisted using it and becoming the same sort of monster that ruined her Optimus and Sentinel's lives, with her mind briefly flashing to her kind sparked friend, as she knows that in her place he wouldn't use it. He'd find another way, but there is no other way this time, and what's needed right now isn't a kind Autobot, it's a monster. With this newfound resolve, Elita stops trying to hold Megatron back, and instead lets him pull her forward, as the force he is generating is enough to slingshot her up towards him, while the tips of her pincers glisten with a thin layer of venom. However, before she can strike, something circular severs the cord binding her to Megatron, so that her arc goes wide, while also costing her the element of surprise. Looking around for the cause, the Spider-Bot is dismayed to find Sentinel now back on his feet, as he reaffixes his throne shield and strides forward to engage her once more. While that's not bad enough, Megatron also prepares to fly away, as now that he no longer has the webs keeping him tied down, he is free to depart and fulfill his mission. Or rather, he would be if a bolt of yellow electricity did not suddenly appear from above the fighting to bind him, as Ratchet's gruff voice declares that he's not letting a filthy con get the Allspark today. At this familiar sound, relief floods Elita and Prowl, with the pair staring up at a nearby overpass where the Docbot now stands, both arms outstretched in a desperate attempt to halt the warmonger's escape. However, with this relief also comes the resurgence of an old fear, as the two Autobots wonder what Ratchet's presence means for Optimus's fate, though they are not left to wonder for long when the roar of an engine fills their auditory circuits, followed by the crunching of concrete, as a red and blue truck they both know well smashes through the overpass barrier and slams headlong into Megatron. This at last is enough to ground the Decepticon, with a pair of leaders crashing to the street below, where they both immediately resume their bot modes to continue the fight. Seeing Optimus up and in fighting shape again is almost enough to elicit a few of those organic tear things from Elita, though as she gets a better look at her friend, she sees all is not like it was before, as while Ratchet was able to save his life, his body still shows the dents and damage of his encounter with Lugnut and Blitzwing, and nowhere is this plainer than his right arm, which has been entirely replaced with one of the assembly line cranes from the plant. Compared to his large square red and blue left arm, this thin gunmetal grey appendage sporting two pincers in place of a hand looks like something skeletal and dead, with it seeming the jury-rigged prosthetic has significantly less mobility than Optimus's original arm, as when the hero rises to his feet and draws his axe, it is with his non-dominant left hand. As a result, when he and Megatron clash blades a moment later, the Autobot is promptly pushed back and left slightly off balance. Recognizing this, the sinister warlord begins pressing his advantage, though in a testament to his quick thinking and will to protect those he cares about, Optimus manages to hold his own, dodging fatal blows and delivering shallow slashes with his axe when he sees an opening. This alone will not be enough to defeat Megatron, something all assembled are aware of. Though having not given up on her plan, Elita attempts to reach the dueling duo. However, to do so, she must first get through Sentinel. While it would be easy and rather ironic to simply scrap him with her venom, such cavalier usage of the poison is a slippery slope she does not wish to tumble down. So if at all possible, she will refrain, even against scum like Sentinel. Though this does not mean she cannot use her pincers, as after reabsorbing the cyber venom into herself, she begins using the pair of extra limbs in conjunction with her own clawed servos to slash at her former friend from 4 different directions. Against such an onslaught, his small shield can only do so much, with it only being a matter of time before one of her hits get past his guard. In this case, it is with her right pincer, with it carving a deep diagonal gash across his chest plate that cleaves his Decepticon insignia in half. Having always been a vain bot, this marring of his pristine appearance infuriates Sentinel, though it also distracts him from the fight at hand, with this being just what Elita needs, as she makes a fist and drives it into his oversized chin for an uppercut that leaves him dazed and unable to fight. Meanwhile, having employed similar clever fighting styles, Ratchet, Prowl, Swoop, and even Sari have begun pressuring Blitzwing and Lugnut, freeing Elita up to go help Optimus, with her once more sticking her webs to the Decepticon leader and launching herself over, though this time when she lands, she stabs her pincers into Megatron's shoulder, earning a grunt of pain for her efforts. Nonetheless, this victory is short-lived, as having generated this poison quite literally on the fly, it is not enough to kill the warlord or even down him, so that as he thrusts his sword backwards to impale her, she is forced to roll onto the ground while Optimus revs up and parries the follow-up strike, even though it almost knocks the axe from his hand. Having an idea on how to remedy this, Elita yells for Optimus to show her his claw, and trusting her implicitly, he does so without question, with this faith being rewarded a moment later when a glob of sticky web coats the substitute servo. Understanding exactly what his old friend is going for, Optimus flashes her an appreciative grin, before extending his axe into its more powerful two-handed configuration, and using the stickiness of the web to grip the upper end of the hilt. At once, Optimus's proficiency with the weapon increases, as now that he's able to wield it the way he's used to rather than with his offhand, things feel more natural, and his instincts honed over stellar cycles are able to kick in without the delay of consciously needing to readjust to the other hand. As a result, when Megatron next swings his twin blades down at him, the red and blue bot is able to parry them both, and even strike the Decepticon in the time it takes him to react. Likewise, when the warlord attempts to blow Optimus's head off with his fusion cannon, the young Prime deftly dodges, before burying his axe deeply enough into the cannon's barrel that it's questionable if Megatron should risk firing it again. However, this is not the only question being raised, as by now Elita, along with Ratchet as a doctor and Blitzwing's logical face as the shrewdest Decepticon, have all noticed that Megatron is slowing down, and his movements are becoming sluggish, with this putting a small ruthless smile on Elita's face as she wordlessly urges him to keel over and go offline after all he's done. Unfortunately, there are some here who want Megatron to live, namely Lugnut, who upon overhearing Blitzwing's comment that the techno-organic abomination must have poisoned their master, begins imploring mighty Megatron to retreat and recover his strength so that he might vanquish the worthless Autobots later. While normally the warlord would ignore this as just more of Lugnut's inane droning, when the axe-wielding Autobot strikes at his leg with enough force to expose the wiring beneath his steely skin, he is forced to accept that perhaps there is some wisdom to the Cyclopean sycophant's words. As a result, though it galls him to do so, he orders a retreat while transforming into his helicopter mode, with the others including Sentinel doing likewise, as they all form up on Megatron and flee. For a moment, Elita cannot believe that the battle is over, and they actually won, though whether or not this is truly a victory or simply a stay of execution is called into question as she surveys the battlefield, where Ratchet is tending to a wounded Bulkhead and Grimlock, while Swoop stares morosely at the body of Snarl. Not only that, but when the Spider-Bot looks to Sari, she sees shock and horror on the girl's face, as she explains that for some reason Blitzwing grabbed her dad during the retreat. While this could just be a case of the triple change's randomness, there could also be a more sinister motive at play, with Prowl somewhat tactlessly pointing out that Professor Sumdac did help restore Megatron, so they can't rule out the possibility that he's secretly a Decepticon sympathizer. Furiously, Sari protests that isn't true, while Ratchet states that he agrees with her, since it's more likely they took Isaac in the hope that he can cure whatever Elita did to their leader, with this causing a pit to form in the Fembot's stomach, as she promises her human friend that she will do whatever it takes to find her dad and bring him home. Sadly, this search will be somewhat delayed, as with the battle over, it falls to the Autobots to repair the damage they and the Decepticons did to the city. Naturally, the surviving Dinobots don't help with this, despite having had a hand in the destruction, instead returning to their island while the Autobots toil. In what could be considered a small mercy, most of the damage is localized to a few areas, namely around Sumdac Tower and the Autobot plant, meaning the heroes can concentrate their efforts on these places. Though, unluckily, they must do so with reduced bot power, since in spite of his best efforts to help, Optimus's crane arm is simply not up to the task of anything requiring fine motor skills, forcing him to rely on his left hand, which he isn't much better with, since now he has to retrain himself to do most things with his offhand. This is an immense source of frustration for the Autobot leader, since he feels as though he's letting his team down by not being able to work as well as he used to, with this being apparent to both Ratchet and Elita, who attempt to support him in their own ways. For Ratchet, this is by offering him a sounding board if Prime wants to talk, since he understands the psychological impact of a war wound, having taken his fair share of them back in the day. As for Elita, she offers a different kind of empathy, as one evening when everyone else has gone home for the day aside from Optimus, who has stuck around to finish his portion of the work, she takes a seat beside him and states in no uncertain terms that she gets why he's upset. Were this coming from anyone else, Optimus might have tried to deny it and play the role of stoic Prime, though with his old friend, he feels safe enough to be vulnerable, admitting that he hates feeling like there's a part of himself he can't control, and that it might have negative consequences on his friends or the innocent people of Detroit down the line. A little playfully, the leader replies that's because he's a control freak, though when the truckbot looks at her to protest, she pulls off her helmet, exposing the pulsating techno-organic head beneath, before giving him a very serious look, as she reiterates that if anyone understands what it's like to have a body that feels wrong and won't do what it's supposed to, it's her. Sighing deeply, Optimus asks how she dealt with it, and trusting him with the same vulnerability he trusted her enough to show, Elita admits that she hasn't dealt with it, since it still makes her angry every time her body manifests some new stupid organic trait that never would have existed if she hadn't gone with him and Sentinel to Arca 7. In a solemn tone, Optimus attempts to apologize once again for ever dragging her to that awful place, though firmly, Elita tells him not to, since there's no point apologizing. It is what it is. That is perhaps the most important lesson she's learned since becoming techno-organic, that wishing things were different accomplishes nothing. Instead, it's better to accept the reality of the situation and learn how to make the most of what they have, while improving that which can be improved. Seeing the logic in this, Optimus thanks his friend for the advice, promising to do as she said. Then, without another word, he places his metal claw on top of her organic hand. Unfortunately, there is one thing that Optimus does struggle to face with the sort of pragmatic determination Elita had suggested, and that is Sari, since of all the people he feels that he failed recently, she is at the top of the list, since it's his fault that she got kidnapped. Evidently, she must feel so too, as ever since the battle with Megatron, she hasn't met his optics once, instead turning her gaze downwards every time she sees him looking. However, here Optimus's assumptions are incorrect, as like him, Sari feels an immense sense of guilt for what happened when Blitzwing and Lugnut attacked, with the girl believing that it's her fault Optimus lost his arm, so he must hate her for that. Unable to keep all this guilt inside, she confides these feelings to Elita and Bulkhead due to their strong bond, though she's a little annoyed when the Spider-Bot seems to find her turmoil funny, having to suppress a small laugh when she hears what's on Sari's mind. All the same, when Elita convinces her to try talking about this with Optimus, the human reluctantly does so, seeking him out at the plant and nervously relaying her fears. At once, the young Prime's optics go wide, as he states that must be why she's been avoiding him, his tone one of surprised understanding. Looking at her feet once again, Sari then asks the question she's been dreading: does he hate her? Though shaking his head vigorously as he kneels down to be close to her level, Optimus soothes that of course he doesn't, and that he never blamed her for the loss of his servo for even a nanocycle. He then explains his own erroneous assumptions regarding her feelings, with this making the redhead chuckle a little, as she admits that she guesses they were both too busy feeling guilty to see how the other really felt, but now that they've talked it out, maybe they can get back to how things were between them before. Smiling softly, Optimus replies that he'd like that. Then, as he extends his prosthetic arm, he and Sari shake on it. However, not everything will be going back to the way it was before, as a few days later a Cybertronian spacecraft lands in the middle of the park, with the Autobots having no trouble recognizing the flagship of Ultra Magnus, meaning the big guy is here in person. Despite some protestation from Captain Fanzone, who is rather irate at more giant machines invading his city, the team present themselves before the Supreme Commander's ship and are subsequently bid to come on board by Magnus's right-hand bot, Rodimus Prime, and his bodyguard, Jazz. For most of the Autobots, the familiarity of a Cybertronian ship provides a welcome sense of home after so many stellar cycles away, though for Elita it reminds her of the Ministry of Science labs and the misery she experienced on her homeworld after the incident, with it only occurring to her now how much she has truly come to think of this messy organic planet as her home. Nonetheless, the two elite guardsmen do not treat her with the disgust or pity most Cybertronians have, with Rodimus even sympathetically stating that he heard what happened to her, though for what it's worth, she doesn't look half bad for a freaky techno-organic chick. Lip curling at this remark, Elita sardonically thanks him for his concern, before spitting a glob of web right into his face, with this causing the orange bot to screech that he needs a decon shower, before running blindly into a wall and knocking himself out cold. This earns small snickers from the rest of her teammates, all of whom felt this reaction was well warranted, while a little nervously, Jez states that he too believes she looks good, in an entirely respectful and, professional manner that is. Following this exchange, the repair crew are then brought before Ultra Magnus, who requests an update on the Allspark and their actions since they lost contact, with Optimus and his friends doing their best to relay the events of their time on Earth. Due to the absence of Sentinel, there is much less hostility and tension in the air, allowing the group to give a full account, and thanks to not having destroyed the Allspark, Ultra Magnus is far more receptive to what they have to say. As a result, when they are done, the Supreme Commander has nothing but praise for the team, stating that they performed admirably, keeping the Allspark from Megatron's clutches twice now, and promising they will all be rewarded handsomely when they return to Cybertron, with the distinct insinuation that Optimus and Elita may have a future in the Elite Guard after all. While very gratifying, Bulkhead questions what about the Decepticons still here on Earth, to which Rodimus and Jazz explain that they scanned this planet before landing, and they found no trace of the comms, so either they packed up and left after they got their skid plates kicked, or that poison Elita mentioned finally finished off Megatron, and the rest of them slagged each other while infighting. Though this is an appealing thought, Optimus states that he would prefer if they be allowed to stay behind, at least long enough to confirm this for themselves, since they have a responsibility to the people of Earth and so can't leave them at the mercy of the Decepticons if their theory happens to prove wrong. Frowning slightly, Ultra Magnus asks if they haven't given enough for this planet already, his optics drifting towards Optimus's crane arm as he says it, though when the Proud Prime shakes his head, the commander sighs that he will take it under consideration, though for now their top priority must be retrieving the Allspark and seeing it transported safely back to Cybertron. Having no objection, Optimus and his team, along with Rodimus and Jazz, who are keen to test out their new Earth alt modes, set off for the Orion. Though due to her spider mode not being able to survive at the bottom of Lake Erie, Elita stays behind with Ultra Magnus. Having always known her to be a moderating influence on her comrades, the Supreme Commander questions whether she truly believes Optimus is right to want to stay on this world, stating he could be fitted with a new servo if they returned home, and with the advancement in medical science since she left, they might be able to make a breakthrough on curing her condition. However, here Elita plainly replies that she agrees with her boss bot, since they owe it to the people of Detroit to protect them from the cons and especially Sentinel. At the mention of the traitor, a shadow falls over Ultra Magnus's face as it did when Optimus first revealed his defection, though in his calm, steady voice he assures her that Sentinel's actions are no one's fault but Sentinel himself. Nodding, Elita replies that she understands that, though she also understands Optimus believes he can turn him back to their side, and while she thinks it's a pipe dream, the chance of acquiring all the intel from Megatron's right-hand bot is surely worth the risk of sparing a few grease grunts. Evidently, this is not something Ultra Magnus had considered, with the old bot growing quiet with contemplation, and seeing a chance to hammer in her point, she adds in a tone of genuine self-loathing that part of the reason he gave her a commission on the Orion in the first place was to keep her out of sight and out of mind, since the average Cybertronian doesn't want to see a techno-organic monster like her walking around as a reminder of what could happen to them out in space. Well, here she's tucked away nicely, so as far as she can tell, this is a win-win. Truthfully, the Spider-Bot doesn't know which of her arguments ultimately wins the Supreme Commander over, though when Optimus and the others return, Ultra Magnus announces his ruling to allow the group to remain on Earth and continue their mission. At this news, everyone rejoices, with Optimus and Elita both thanking the Magnus for his trust, to which the old warrior meets both their optics and states that they've earned it, before dismissing them from his ship so they can begin the long journey back to Cybertron with the Allspark. Outside the vessel, Sari waits with bated breath, though when she sees her friends emerging, she can barely bring herself to ask what happened. Smiling broadly as he picks her up, Bulkhead reveals that Ultra Magnus has let them stay, with this causing the girl to beam as well, while Elita chuckles that she kind of really thought they were going to leave, did she? After all, she still has to keep her promise to rescue Sari's dad. Speaking of, down in the mines outside Detroit, Isaac finds himself a prisoner of Megatron and the Decepticons, who in this timeline have two tasks for him. The first is the same as Kennen, to develop them a space bridge, though the second is far more precarious and time-sensitive, as while Megatron did manage to survive Elita's poisoning, he has been significantly weakened, and due to lacking any way to purge the toxins from his circuitry, it seems inevitable that it will eventually take him offline. That is, unless the organic scientist can find a cure, something Isaac is most reluctant to do, though as always, Megatron is quite persuasive, making it abundantly clear that should the human fail to save his life, then his own will end shortly thereafter, and in a much more agonizing manner. It is around this time that Sentinel returns from a mission to steal the elite guard ship's tachyon transmitter, having used his status as a fallen Autobot to pass undetected during their scan for Decepticon signals. However, even this is not enough to remove the stain of his repeated failures during the battle, with Megatron giving his second-in-command a cold look as he acknowledges the truckbot actually managed to carry out his orders this time. What a pleasant surprise. Knowing he cannot bully or beat even a weakened Megatron like he could Lugnut and Blitzwing when they insulted him, Sentinel simply bows before his lord and responds that he is always ready to serve, with this making Blitzwing's insane face snicker, though the warlord leers that he is pleased to hear it, since he has a new assignment for him. A Decepticon signal has been detected in the city, and he wishes for his loyal servant to investigate. Truthfully, Megatron knows that this is a forgery, and a mediocre one at that, though it amuses him to see the prideful bot reduced to a gopher while he seethes with rage he cannot dare to express. Nonetheless, Sentinel does obey, transforming into a truck once more, and driving back into the city he just left. As Megatron had suspected, this signal is indeed a fake, though what no one could have anticipated is that waiting at the coordinates is Henry Masterson, who makes use of his new and improved Headmaster unit to sever Sentinel's head and lay claim to his body so he can continue his evil schemes. As for the Decepticon's head, he feels lower than he has for a long time, and not just because he's lying on the ground, with the only worse experience he can recall being his dismissal from the academy. At least back then he had not suffered the humiliation alone, though this recent string of embarrassments have been visited on him exclusively. Were that not bad enough, there is now the question of what to do, since if he reports back that he's had his body stolen by a disgusting organic, he very much doubts his teammates would come to his aid, either leaving him to rust and calling it a consequence of his own weakness, or simply scrapping him then and there for being a liability. Either way, that is an outcome he cannot afford, and so galling though it might be, he activates his comm and calls the only bots that might help him. Back at the plant, Elita and Optimus both feel the incoming call, and upon answering it are shocked to hear Sentinel's voice. In an acidic tone, the Spiderbot hisses that he has a lot of nerve calling them like this, though before she can hang up, he urgently utters the phrase "broken lance." At once Optimus and Elita freeze, as they remember this old code from their academy days, with it only being used when one of them desperately needs help, and needs it discreetly. Recognizing how serious the situation must be if Sentinel is calling them for assistance, the pair acknowledge the message and respond that they're on their way. Then, without needing to say a word, they transform and roll out. Making their way to the alley where Sentinel's signal originated from, the two Autobots initially don't see him, and so call out, with Elita growling that if this is a trap or an attempt to play on their former friendship, she'll tear him servo from servo, though this diatribe is interrupted when he bashfully tells them to look down. Upon catching sight of the boastful bot reduced to nothing but a helpless head on the floor, both Optimus and Elita burst out laughing, while regaining some of his old bravado, the green and purple con snaps at them to stop. When they're finally done laughing, which for Elita is a very long time since she absolutely thinks he deserves this, the two Autobots state that they recognize Masterson's handiwork, so they will help him, if only because it's better to deal with 4 Decepticons whose motives and goals they understand, than 3 Decepticons and a rogue element like Masterson who has already demonstrated a cruel disregard for life that possibly even outstrips Sentinel's own. In his most unctuous tone, the traitor thanks them for this, vowing that he won't forget it. Though having no desire to listen to him prattle, Elita uses this chance to web up his mouth and adhere him to her abdomen, while snapping at him to kiss her aft. Figuring they'll need the others' help if they want to track down Masterson, Optimus radios back to base, with Prowl agreeing to check the news for anything the mad scientist might be interested in, though it turns out the answer they need is much closer to home, as at that point Bulkhead arrives with Sari, who has been evicted from hers following Porter-C. Powell taking over some deck systems in the wake of Isaac's disappearance. As part of this, her bedroom has been given to none other than Masterson, with Prowl promptly calling this in to Prime. Grateful for the lead, Optimus, Elita, and a still gagged Sentinel make their way over to Sumdac Tower, though despite having worked day and night to repair it, they are barred from entering, with Powell stating that things are different with him in charge. However, his company is still devoted to having an amiable relationship with the Autobots, so as a show of good faith, he can tell them that Masterson is not here. Seeing that this corporate sleaze has no intention of giving them anything, Elita looks to Elita, wordlessly asking if she can give him a little scare, since that will almost certainly make him more cooperative. Though shaking his head, Optimus gives her a small smile that suggests he has a better plan. As it turns out, this is to wait outside as Pal predictably calls Masterson to warn him about the Autobots, with Optimus using this phone signal to track the late-speaking lout to the docks. Impressed with his creative solution, Elita praises that her old friend never fails to surprise her. While having finally torn a hole in the webbing through non-stop attempts at speech, Sentinel begrudgingly admits that Optimus actually had a good idea for once. Too bad it doesn't make up for the other million screw-ups. Not dignifying this with a response, Elita simply douses him with a fresh coat of webs, then transforms back into her spider mode, while Optimus does the same with his truck form, allowing her to climb onto the back before they race off for the harbour. And it is good that they do employ speed here, as when they arrive, Masterson and Sentinel's body is on board a cargo ship leaving Detroit for parts unknown. Refusing to let him get away, Optimus transforms and leaps on board, while Elita swings over, with the pair soon finding themselves face to face with their foe. In an angry voice, Masterson snaps that he's not going to let some bogus robot stop his plan, though finding him almost as grating as Sentinel, Elita decides to kill two birds with one stone, as she affixes some more web to her unwilling passenger, and uses him as a morning star to strike the Headmaster's face. As she had hoped, this is a painful experience for both of them, with Sentinel testily accusing her of enjoying this, though it does at least distract Masterson long enough for Optimus to come in and behead the Headmaster unit. Seeing that he's beaten, the scruffy scientist then engages the unit's thrusters and attempts to flee, though before he can get very far, he feels the pincers of Optimus's claw close around his vehicle, since while it may lack dexterity, it has the unique advantage of enduring heat and pressure without causing its wielder any pain. As a result, it is child's play to hold him until they return to port and Captain Fanzone arrives, though to the Autobots' dismay, Powell is not far behind him, with the man using a couple of legal loopholes to keep his employee out of prison. As for Elita, while not a docbot, she is a scientist, and so is able to do an adequate job of reattaching Sentinel's head, even if she has to resist the temptation to put it on backwards. For her efforts, she is met with the traitor's usual smug scowl, as now that he's no longer at her and Optimus's mercy, he sees no need to play nice. In fact, he briefly considers launching a sneak attack right when their guards are down, since surely terminating two Autobots would get him back in Megatron's good graces. However, as he looks at the pair, he doesn't feel like fighting right now, and so simply tells them this changes nothing, before shifting back into a truck and driving away. Scowling angrily, Elita grumbles that she should have known better than to expect gratitude from someone like him, though Optimus isn't so sure, since he saw the look in Sentinel's optics right before he left, and in spite of what their former friend said, something has changed between them. Meanwhile, Sentinel finally arrives back at the mine, though the only welcome he receives is a terse demand from Megatron to explain why he was gone so long. Bowing like usual, the truckbot explains that he ran into the Autobots, which caused some delay, though this just makes the Decepticon leader sneer harder, as he sardonically states that he hopes they weren't too much trouble for his second-in-command, while Blitzwing and Lugnut laugh. In a flat voice, the defector assures his lord that they weren't. Then, when he is dismissed with a skeptical grunt, he steps away from the others. While he had always known the Decepticons were a cutthroat group, this reception makes clear just how little his supposed comrades care, since to them he is just as disposable as Starscream. When he had joined, Megatron had offered him a future, but is this all he can hope for? Thinly vowed contempt for as long as he is useful, then abandonment when he ceases to be? How is that any different from what Ultra Magnus did to him? Maybe the loyalty is just a myth, and everyone's only in it for themselves. Though, as this thought crosses his mind, he cannot help but be aware of the fact that Optimus and Elita, his enemies, helped him when his allies would not have. This is a troubling realization, as for so long he has laid all his problems at their feet, yet now they don't seem to fit. And as he looks at his reflection in the glow of Sumdak's cage, he sees the scratch Elita left on his chest, and his split Decepticon insignia. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.